What's up, bullish friends? Hope you guys are doing well out there today. And I want to get into a story today that I just read for the first time last night, and I want to share this with you, and I want your opinion at the end of me going through this article. Now, it's a quick article, and we'll go through this as quickly as possible, and then I'm going to ask you guys a question, and I want to see if we can have a discussion around it. So, this article, it was an opinion editorial by Pierre Richard, the Vice President of Research at Riot Platforms. Now, keep in mind, Riot Platforms deals with crypto mining. So while I go through this, just understand that's the direction that this is coming from in this article. Okay, so let me begin this. Bitcoin mining has zero carbon emissions, and policies to reduce carbon emissions should be focused on real carbon emitters like airplanes and coal power plants. Focusing on zero-emission consumers like electric vehicles and Bitcoin mining is unscientific. Electricity producers' carbon emissions are already accounted for as Scope 1 direct emissions per the U.S. EPA. The only purpose of double counting emissions with Scope 2 indirect emissions is to expand the power of government bureaucracy. Direct Scope 1 emissions increase carbon dioxide CO2 in the atmosphere. Indirect Scope 2 emissions are an unscientific fiction. But it gets worse. This week we learned that the New York Times is working on a story to introduce for the first time fractional reserve indirect carbon accounting, or FRICA. It is expected to rebrand this as marginal indirect carbon accounting to make it more palatable. We recently found out the hard way that fiat banks don't hold all of our money. They only hold a small percentage and lend out the rest, an inflationary and dubious practice known as fractional reserve banking. The New York Times' upcoming FRICA methodology is the equivalent of stress testing a fractional reserve bank by withdrawing one marginal dollar and then announcing that not only is the bank solvent, but it's also 100% cash reserved. This bad accounting ignores the actual balance sheet assets. The New York Times has never used this method of measuring fictitious indirect carbon emissions for any other industry, and it will be leveraging it to attack Bitcoin mining. The New York Times FRICA assumes that every incremental increase in electricity consumption always increases electricity production from a natural gas power plant. The absurd conclusion of FRICA is that 100% of electricity is from carbon-emitting natural gas because any single consumer of electricity could turn off and decrease marginal demand. In 2022, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, reported that the Texas grid produced roughly 40% of electricity from zero-carbon nuclear, solar, and wind, and 60% of electricity from carbon-emitting natural gas and coal. The New York Times creative accounting will deliberately hide the fact that Texas is a leader in renewable energy. Even if only 1% of electricity was produced by natural gas power plants, FRICA would claim that 100% of electricity consumption is causing indirect carbon emissions. The reality is that the additional demand for electricity incentivizes wind and solar producers to invest more in energy infrastructure. It is unscientific to assert that increases in baseload demand can only incentivize short-term peaking natural gas power plants. In fact, the opposite is true. Bitcoin mining is highly interruptible, meaning that it provides revenue to renewables during normal grid conditions and turns off when non-mining demand spikes. Bitcoin mining helps avoid the use of natural gas peaker plants thanks to demand response. The New York Times FRICA will not just be flawed from an energy grid perspective. From a Bitcoin mining perspective, it is also inaccurate to assert that turning off mining rigs in Texas would not incentivize more Bitcoin mining abroad on adversaries' dirty grids like those in Russia and Venezuela. Bitcoin is an independent global monetary system, so arbitrarily taxing proof-of-work mining in the United States would only sabotage our nation's economic competitiveness and reduce demand for renewable energy. New York Times is expected to inflate fictitious carbon emissions for a singular political end, unfairly attacking Bitcoin mining in the United States. Simultaneously, the current presidential administration is pushing for a punitive tax on Bitcoin mining that would surrender the United States leadership position to foreign adversaries. Good journalism and good policy should reject both. Okay, so I wanted to read that article because I want to ask an important question. And with the last month or so, last month and a half, I've been going over, the articles, like, again, covering the potential 30% crypto electricity tax, the Fednow issues, the CBDC issues going forward, and, of course, the staking issues that I had mentioned before, that Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, was discussing, where he was talking about basically a war coming on staking and on certain portions of crypto. So that being said, and with this article, do you guys think that there's some type of war behind the scenes going on crypto in general to push some kind of different narrative? Now, whether that means that we go into the path of getting more into like the CBDCs, or is there another angle here that is being overlooked? Okay, because I happen to agree with a lot of what is in this article. And for one, I'm a very pro energy kind of person. So like I look at almost all energy is pretty much a good way to go. Now, can we talk about getting rid of some of the things, like some of the coal power plants and things like that, and switching to more renewable energies, and perhaps maybe even like your Gen 4 nuclear power and things like that? I definitely think that there's room to talk about all that and to basically clean up what we're doing. But I think you get into a slippery slope when you start getting into all this crypto stuff and saying that we basically need to advocate for throwing higher taxes onto mining or ending it altogether. And I think, again, as the article states, it does end our competitiveness with the rest of the world. Now, if you're not in the U.S., maybe this doesn't concern you at all, or you don't even worry about it. But in the U.S., I would think, we want to be as competitive on a world stage as possible. I could be missing something here. I want to know your guys' thoughts. I want to know if you think that this is a larger war on crypto going forward, or if you really think this is irrelevant, or maybe you have a totally different opinion from me. Anyway, I want to know what you guys think. I wanted to share this with you today and get your thoughts, and we can have a discussion about this. And as always, guys, I'll see you in the next video.